In July of 1938, Einstein deposited a manuscript at the Library of Congress, 12 pages, handwritten in German, with a deceptively simple title, Unified Field Theory. It was the only document from Einstein with that exact title, no further specifications, and it was never intended for publication. Why would the greatest mind of the 20th century write something so important and then ensure it would never see the light of day? What secrets were locked within those pages? Secrets too dangerous for the world to witness. Today, I'm going to unveil what was really inside that manuscript, what Einstein unearthed about the very nature of reality that the scientific establishment desperately tried to bury, and why, even 8 decades later, this document still raises more questions than answers. You probably know Einstein as the man who cracked the code on E equals mc squared, the physicist who revolutionized our understanding of time and space. But there was another Einstein, an Einstein that most people have never encountered, an Einstein that history books conveniently ignore, an Einstein who spent the last 30 years of his life consumed by something much, much bigger, something he believed to be the greatest discovery in the history of science, something so revolutionary that he'd rather bury it than let it fall into the wrong hands. Her theory that would unite all the forces of the universe, gravity, electromagnetism, the forces that hold atoms together. Einstein was convinced there was a single equation behind it all, a formula that would reveal how God created reality, the blueprint of reality. And he found something that compelled him to stash a manuscript in a library and never publish it. This isn't some fringe conspiracy theory. It's a documented historical fact. The manuscript exists. It's sitting in the Library of Congress. Anyone can verify it. The question isn't whether it exists. It's why it was hidden for so long and what it truly contains. The document has an official catalog number, accessible to any researcher. But for over 80 years, almost no one paid any attention. It was there, hidden in plain sight, like so many other truths that we'd rather ignore. Before we go any further, you need to understand the context. It's 1938, and the world is teetering on the brink of World War II. Einstein had fled Nazi Germany 5 years prior. He was the most famous scientist on the planet, but also the most watched. The FBI had already begun its file on Einstein in December of 1932. That file would eventually balloon to over 1,400 pages. Einstein knew he was being monitored. At a dinner in 1948, he confided in the Polish ambassador, "You must realize that the United States is no longer a free country. Our conversation is being recorded. My home is under constant surveillance." The fact that this very conversation appears in his FBI file confirms he was right. That file only came to light in 1983, when Professor Robert Alan Schwartz of Florida International University penned an article about it. Until then, up to 25% of the file was censored or withheld by the authorities. It took lawsuits under the Freedom of Information Act to reveal the rest. Journalist Fred Jerome sued the government and gained access to most of the remaining material. The result, a file exceeding 1,800 pages. 1,800 pages on a theoretical physicist. Why such intense interest? What you discover in that file is revealing. Surveillance reports, transcripts of conversations, lists of individuals Einstein met with. The American government was obsessed with him, not because they thought he was a communist, but because he knew things that they wanted to control, redacted knowledge. So picture this. July 1938. Einstein is 59 years old. He's working in Princeton, but his most important work will never see the light of day. He handwrites 12 pages, signs them, dates them, and deposits them at the Library of Congress, with the help of his friend Elias Avery Lowe. Not for publication, but for preservation. Elias Avery Lowe was a renowned paleographer, a specialist in ancient manuscripts. Why would Einstein choose an expert in historical documents to safeguard his equations, perhaps because he knew that this manuscript would one day be studied as a historical artifact, as evidence of something that official science tried to erase. Now, what was inside that manuscript? Researchers Tilman Sauer and Tobias Schutz finally analyzed the document in 2021. They uncovered something fascinating. The manuscript presented the same theory that Einstein had published in the Annals of Mathematics that very month, but in a completely different way. The published version was technical, accessible only to specialists, but the Washington Manuscript was something more. It was axiomatic, philosophical. It was Einstein trying to explain not just how his theory worked, but why it had to work that way. The researchers noted that, despite its highly technical nature, the manuscript would only be comprehensible to a handful of his contemporaries. So why even write it? Why deposit it in a public library if almost no one could understand it? The answer may lie in what Einstein was really trying to communicate. You see, Einstein wasn't just crunching numbers. He was trying to reveal the hidden architecture of reality, the mathematical framework that underlies everything that exists. He called it the thoughts of God, not metaphorically, literally. He believed that mathematics was the language of the Creator. God's equation, the Einstein archives in Jerusalem, hold two identical Xerox copies of a 15-page typescript, also titled Unified Field Theory. These copies are typewritten versions of the original manuscript, with equations added by hand, by Einstein himself. Why create typewritten copies of something that would never be published, unless it was for restricted distribution to a select group that needed to know? You see, the unified field theory wasn't just about physics, and Einstein was trying to find what the mathematical language that God used to create the universe. He once said that he wanted to know the thoughts of God. Everything else reads is just details. That wasn't a metaphor. Einstein literally believed that there was an intelligence behind creation, a perfect mathematical order that, once uncovered, would reveal secrets that humanity had never imagined. And in the Washington Manuscript, Einstein was closer than ever to revealing those thoughts. The document was his attempt to capture that vision on paper, to preserve it for posterity, to ensure that, even if he couldn't complete the work, someone in the future could carry it on. But there was a problem. The scientific community didn't want to listen. They had decided that Einstein was wrong, that his quest was a waste of time, that quantum mechanics held all the answers. From 1920 onward, Einstein faced fierce opposition, not just from the Nazis, who branded relativity as Jewish physics and staged book burnings, but from respectable scientists who simply couldn't accept his ideas. In 1931, they published a book called 100 Authors Against Einstein. When Einstein was asked about it, he replied, "To defeat relativity, one doesn't need the word of 100 scientists. Just one fact." But no such fact emerged. Relativity was confirmed again and again. Every experiment, every observation, every measurement confirmed what Einstein had predicted. The theory of relativity was correct and remains correct to this day. The problem was something else. The problem was what Einstein was doing now, what he was trying to uncover after relativity. The problem began back in 1920, when Ernest Geiger, head of the optical department at the Reich Physical and Technical Institute, participated in an event hosted by the Working Group of German Natural Scientists for the Preservation of Pure Science. The name sounds innocent enough, but it was an anti-Semitic group dedicated to destroying Einstein's career. Charles Lane Poor, a respected astronomer and professor of celestial mechanics at Columbia University, wrote several books attacking general relativity, gravitation versus relativity. What Einstein really did. Einstein is wrong. A professor from one of the most prestigious universities in the world, dedicating his career to proving Einstein was wrong. The problem was that Einstein was advancing into territory that conventional science considered unacceptable. He was connecting physics with something that looked disturbingly like metaphysics. He was suggesting that the mathematics of the universe revealed an underlying intelligence. And that was intolerable for the materialistic scientific establishment. You need to understand something about the academic world. It operates by consensus. Ideas that challenge the dominant paradigm too much aren't refuted. They're ignored. They're buried in archives. They're labeled as the work of a genius in decline. And that's exactly what was happening to Einstein. While he pursued the theory that would unify everything, his colleagues said he had lost his way, that he was wasting his talent, that quantum mechanics, with its uncertainty and probability, had rendered Einstein's quest obsolete. But Einstein didn't agree. God does not play dice, he insisted. There was a deeper reality behind the quantum probabilities. A mathematical structure that once discovered would reveal that the universe was deterministic, ordered, intelligent. While other physicists were content with probabilities and uncertainties, Einstein sought certainties. He sought absolute laws. He sought the source code of existence. And this search isolated him from the academic mainstream. But he didn't care. He knew he was on the right path. The Washington Manuscript was his attempt to codify this vision, this blueprint of reality. And here it gets more interesting. In one of his letters, Einstein mentioned that he had corresponded with the French mathematician Élie Cartan, who had previously worked on teleparallel theory. After this correspondence, Einstein withdrew his own manuscript from publication to revise it. He realized there was more to discover, more layers of truth that still needed to be unveiled, more redacted knowledge to unearth. Now let me tell you what happened in the years that followed. Einstein didn't stop. He continued working on the unified field theory for the rest of his life. 30 years of obsession, thousands of pages of calculations, many of them never published. Think about that for a moment. The man who discovered relativity, the man whose work led to the atomic bomb and nuclear energy, the man whose equation E equals mc squared changed the world. That man spent 3 decades working on something he considered even more important. And almost no one knows what it was. The Einstein archives in Jerusalem contain a considerable collection of calculations on worksheets, documenting Einstein's scientific concerns in the last 3 decades of his life. Many of these documents still need more detailed analysis. And then we come to April 1955. Einstein is 76 years old. He's taken to Princeton Hospital with an abdominal aortic aneurysm. The doctors wanted to operate. Einstein refused. He said, "I want to go when I want. It is artificial to prolong life. I have done my share. It is time to go. I will do it elegantly." But even knowing he was going to die, he made one last request, paper and pencil, so he could continue working on his unified field theory, on God's equation. He died shortly after 1 o'clock in the morning on April 18, 1955. Beside his bed, the nurse found 12 pages of densely written equations, full of scratches and corrections. Until the last moment, he struggled to read the mind of the creator of the cosmos. 9 pages of unfinished notes. The equations show that he was still trying to formulate the grand unified field theory, ideas that obsessed him for the last 30 years of his life. Do you notice the pattern? In 1938, 12 pages deposited in the Library of Congress. In 1955, 12 pages beside his deathbed. Einstein never gave up. He knew there was something there, something the world needed to know. As some untold story, 12 pages, the same number, as if he had come full circle, as if at the end of his life he was redoing the work he had started 17 years earlier. What was in those equations that kept him obsessed for so long? But the scientific establishment had other plans. Einstein's last assistant, Breuer Kaufmann, presented her final considerations on the 50th anniversary of the theory of relativity in Bern in July 1955, just a few weeks after his death. She had direct access to his latest calculations. What she revealed at that conference never received the attention it deserved. The asymmetric approach to the unified field theory had dominated Einstein's work from the mid-1940s until the end of his life. It was a radically different approach from anything conventional physics accepted. And it was exactly that approach that died with him. Or did it die? Was the knowledge really lost? Or was it transferred to hands that knew how to use it in secret? After Einstein's death, his teleparallel approach to the unified field theory simply stopped being researched. Physicists decided it wasn't compatible with new discoveries, such as the weak and strong nuclear forces. But was that the whole story? Or was there something in Einstein's work that was too dangerous, something that challenged not only physics, but the very nature of what we consider possible? Einstein's teleparallel theory was radically different from anything conventional physics accepted. It suggested that space-time could have geometric properties that would allow phenomena considered impossible, properties that, if understood, would give whoever mastered them an unimaginable power. Think about it. Einstein was connecting gravity and electromagnetism. He was suggesting that the geometry of space-time could be manipulated, that energy and matter were just different expressions of something more fundamental. He was hunting for God's equation, the very blueprint of reality if he was right. The implications would be revolutionary. Time travel, manipulation of gravity, unlimited energy, technologies that would completely change the balance of power in the world. And all this in 1938, on the eve of World War II, with the American nuclear program about to begin, and the scientific establishment on edge. Do you think it's a coincidence that Einstein's most profound work was never published, that his manuscripts were deposited in archives instead of scientific journals, that the academic community quickly dismissed his research? After his death? Redacted knowledge, perhaps. I don't believe in coincidences. History is full of examples of knowledge that was suppressed because it was too dangerous, technologies that were classified, discoveries that were buried, and Einstein's work may be just another example of that, an untold story. If you're watching this, you're different. You don't accept the official version of things. You seek the truth, Mercy, behind the convenient narratives, and you know that the story we're told is rarely the whole story. And Einstein's story is a perfect example. We've been taught that he was a genius who discovered relativity and then wasted his last years on a quixotic quest. But what if it's the opposite? What if Einstein's last 30 years of work contain his most important discoveries? What if the Washington Manuscript is just the tip of the iceberg? Consider this. Einstein was a genius, one of the greatest who ever lived. Do you really believe that he spent 30 years chasing a dead end? That the man who revolutionized physics wasted 3 decades on something worthless? Or was he out in front, in territory that others couldn't even imagine? The Einstein archives in Jerusalem contain thousands of pages of calculations and notes that have never been fully analyzed. Decades of work from one of history's greatest geniuses waiting to be discovered. Why isn't anyone looking? Or maybe they are. Maybe there are people in secret labs and military installations who know exactly what Einstein discovered. Maybe the technology based on his work already exists. Maybe the unified field theory isn't just a theory anymore. Think about the sightings of unidentified flying objects that governments now admit are real. Think about technologies that seem to defy conventional physics. Could someone, somewhere, have deciphered what Einstein left behind? I know, this sounds like conspiracy, but consider the fact The FBI kept Einstein under constant surveillance, over 1,400 pages in his FBI file. Why? Einstein wasn't a spy. He wasn't a communist. Despite the accusations, he was a theoretical physicist, unless his theories had practical implications that they wanted to control. The FBI wouldn't waste resources monitoring someone out of curiosity. They monitored Einstein because they believed that he represented some kind of threat, or because he knew something that they wanted to control, or both. Think about the Manhattan Project. Einstein signed the letter. That started the American nuclear program. He knew that E=mc² could be used to create the most destructive bomb in history. Now imagine that he discovered something even bigger, something that would make nuclear bombs look like toys, something that could literally alter the fabric of reality. God's equation made manifest. Would you publish that, or would you deposit it in an archive, hoping that one day when humanity would be ready? Einstein was a pacifist. He spent his whole life regretting that he signed the letter. That led to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He once said, "I made one great mistake in my life when I signed the letter to President Roosevelt recommending that atomic bombs be made. If he discovered something even more powerful, something that could be used for good or for evil, what do you think he would do? He would protect it. He would hide it. He would deposit it in archives with instructions never to publish, and he would wait." Was that what Einstein was doing? Was he protecting the world from itself? Was he hiding something that could be used for evil? Or was he simply waiting for the right moment, for the truth to come out, waiting for a world that was ready to use this knowledge with wisdom, a world that had evolved beyond war and greed, a world that deserved to know how reality really works, the very blueprint of reality. We're not that world yet, but we're getting closer. Every day, more people awaken, more people question, more people seek the truth behind the official narratives. And maybe that's why this knowledge is starting to surface now. Maybe there's a synchronicity in all of this. The Washington Manuscript being analyzed for the first time in 2021. Artificial intelligence starting to decipher patterns that humans can't see. Quantum physics increasingly confirming that consciousness plays a role in reality. Einstein was decades ahead of his time. He saw connections that his contemporaries couldn't see, and he paid the price for it. Academic isolation, government surveillance, ridicule from his own colleagues. He knew too much. It was redacted knowledge. The greatest visionaries in history have always been misunderstood in their time. Galileo was persecuted by the church. Tesla died in poverty, while his ideas were stolen, and Einstein was treated as a genius in decline, when in reality, he was doing his most important work, trying to decipher God's equation, but he never stopped until his last breath. He kept calculating. He kept seeking. He kept trying to show us something he knew to be true. The question is, are we ready to hear it? If you've made it this far, you probably are. You're part of a minority that questions, that seeks, that refuses to accept superficial explanations. You know instinctively that there's more to the story than we've been told, and it's for people like you that this knowledge is finally being revealed. If you felt the truth of these words, the super thanks is your way to support this work. When you click it, and you are saying, truth matters. You are positioning yourself as someone who believes that there's more to the story than we've been told. It's not payment. It's an act of alignment. It's you joining a group that refuses to accept the sanitized version of reality. For 30 years of his life, Einstein dedicated himself to something most considered pure madness. He was ridiculed, surveilled, and his discoveries were buried. But he persisted because he knew he was right. And now, more than 80 years later, we're finally starting to understand what he saw. The unified field theory wasn't just about uniting gravity and electromagnetism. It was about revealing the fundamental blueprint of reality, the mathematical language that underpins everything, God's equation, coded in precise formulas. If Einstein was correct, then everything we think we know about physics is just a shadow of something far greater. A theory that, once fully comprehended, would transform our civilization, granting humanity powers we currently deem supernatural, revealing we are part of something infinitely more vast and mysterious than we ever imagined. Einstein found fragments of this language. He wrote them down, and he hid them, because he knew humanity wasn't ready to. But are you ready now? Are you ready to question everything you've been taught about physics, about reality, about what is even possible? Are you ready to see beyond the curtain and glimpse what Einstein saw? The question I leave you with is this: why do you think Einstein never published his most important work? Was he protecting the world from itself? Or was he waiting for US? Comment below. Truth. If you believe there's more to this untold story, hoax. If you think I'm seeing things that aren't there, and tell me. Have you ever felt like the official version of things just doesn't quite add up? I'll be responding to everyone in the first 2 hours, and if this video has opened your eyes to something you didn't know, share it with someone else who's also seeking the truth. Someone who knows that reality is stranger and more wonderful than we've been led to believe. Einstein knew, and now you know too. The Washington Manuscript exists. The calculations exist. The truth is out there, waiting for anyone who's brave enough to look. The question is, will you be one of those who looks, or will you continue believing the official version of the story? The choice is yours. It always has been.